the same.
All right, calling the 7 p.m. public hearing to order. We will start with a roll call. Ms. LeBreau.
Ms. Blanks? Ms. Blanks?
Here.
Ms. Cantor?
Here.
Mr. Davidoff?
Here.
Ms. Fay?
Here.
Oh, my goodness. I've got my... Hold on 1 second. Mr. Cortez?
Here.
Mr. Davidoff?
Here again.
And Ms. Fay? I'm not in the right organ. Mr. Sweeney? And Mr. Winograd? And Mr. Zatanowicz?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
I'll say
LeBreau.
that
You up with that,
Adrian
baby?
Billing-Smith is here also.
Billing Smith.
All right.
Ms. Billing-Smith, you were supposed to be first. Sorry. You're now on the end.
Okay.
That education.
Oh, boy. This is going to be an interesting meeting. Okay. We will start with the presentation from the town planner. Oh, we'll go, well, I'm going to start with the
Thank
town.
you, Madam Mayor. I'll begin with the public hearing with a little history of how this transformational ordinance evolved, and we'll then turn it over to our town planner, Mr. Dumais, to provide an overview of the transit-oriented development ordinance itself from a zoning perspective. This ordinance is a result of a tremendous amount of work through our Planning and Zoning Division, and really goes back 6 years now when our Planning Division managed the new Park Avenue Transit Area Complete Street Study. Then, back in 2020, the West Hartford Plan of Conservation and Development was finalized, which you know place an emphasis and focus on transit-oriented development. But it was not until April of 2021 where we began to conduct a TOD planning initiative that resulted in the ordinance that is before you this evening. Included in this work was a significant community engagement process that began in the spring of 2021, which helped shape the ordinance that's before you as well this evening. TOD is a high-density, mixed-use development located within a short walk, quarter-mile or less, to mass transit stations, which in our case includes the Elmwood and Flatbush, Connecticut fast-track stations, along with our planned Connecticut rail station. In addition to promoting mixed use in a pedestrian-friendly environment, the TOD encourages lower parking requirements, which benefits our community by reducing energy consumption, greenhouse gases, and contributes to a vibrant, livable, and sustainable community. This ordinance will also encourage infill development, rehabilitation, and redevelopment. The success of this type of development is dependent on the degree of which its land use composition, streetscape design, and urban form allow between the community and the local transit asset. And thanks to our town planner and his team, we feel we have an ordinance that will allow for a very positive change for the new Britain Avenue, New Park Avenue corridor, in and around the Elmwood and Flatbush, Connecticut fast-track stations. At this point, through you, Mayor, I'll turn it over to our town planner, Mr. Dumais, who will walk us through a larger portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwith. For the record, Todd Dumais, Town Planner, and thank you for the introductory remarks, Mr. Ledwith. and providing some of the context and background to this initiative, which, as Mr. Lidweth said, has gone back many years, in fact, even longer than 6 years if we go back and look at some earlier initiatives that we collaborated with the state of Connecticut and Regional Council of Governments on. When we talk about TOD, and I'd like to provide a brief overview in addition to what Mr. Ledwith said, let's remember the 4 Ds. So we have distance, so generally a 5 to 10 minute walk from a fixed node of transit, and that is half mile to quarter mile. So half mile being 10-minute walk, 5-minute walk being a quarter mile. Having density, a relatively high population and or employment densities is critical to successful transit-oriented development. Diversity, having a diverse mix of land uses that create opportunities for vibrant live, work, and play. And then design, this is the other critical component that I think the ordinance highlights, to create pedestrian-friendly public realm and building designs with compact development and well-designed parking opportunities that support public transit use. We might be asking ourselves, how do those principles relate back to zoning? Well, first, we'll talk about density. Residential densities can correlate with floor area ratios, building coverage, and building heights, and also parking requirements. Diversity, we can think about that in the context of what type of uses are permitted within the district. Design, these are things that we talk about with setbacks, how far buildings have to be from a street or adjacent properties. The orientation of the building, where is the building front, how does it open, how does it activate the street, basic architectural standards or other site design standards. So in the ordinance, we talk about fenestration, the amount of windows and the doors that activate in front on the street, and also parking requirements. This is the only text I'll read, I promise, but I think it's important. So this is right from the ordinance. And it's the purpose of the TOD, and I think it's informative, instructive to our conversation this evening. The purpose of the district is to encourage development in a predictable, contextually design-focused manner within walking distance of the CT Fast Track stations. The TOD is intended to support transit-oriented development principles which foster the creation of complete neighborhoods. The district is designed to help preserve and expand opportunities for businesses and employers that serve West Hartford residents and the surrounding region, to encourage a mix of retail, restaurant, office, entertainment, and residential uses that provide opportunities to live, work, and play, to promote moderate to high residential and employment densities that support transit use, to encourage infill development, rehabilitation, redevelopment, and adaptive reuse that promote a consistent pedestrian-oriented building and site design. So that's a lot to try to fit into an ordinance. I can't promise that we got it 100% correct, but I think we have a good starting point to see how this can help transform these 2 important areas of the community. Having said that, the first area is the Flatbush Transit Station. When we talk about this transit-oriented development district, it's really our 2 station areas, a quarter mile out from each. So the map on the screen right now is the Flatbush Station located in the middle. That red dot around that halo, that is the 5-minute walk shed. And all of the streets highlighted in yellow are streets to which this ordinance applies, and they are generally predominantly all some type of commercial zoning. The Elmwood Station area, similarly, the map here identifies Elmwood Station in the center, again with the highlighted streets of the streets that are impacted by the proposed ordinance with our 5-minute walk shed analysis. How that translates into the existing zoning, what you see on the slide now, to the left is our existing zoning map. Anything you see in pink or red, and I apologize, the sun's not going to make, so pink, here's our corridor, is one of 2 industrial zones, IG or IE. Then the red is the BG zone. So you can see at the northern edge of the 2 districts and at the southern terminus, we have a mix of BG, which is general business, and for the most part, we're talking about industrially zoned properties. And that's really what comprises the corridor. So the way the ordinance was constructed was to try to start with a 5-minute walk shed in properties within that zone that are already zoned commercial, to try to create a mixed-use environment. And the map on the right, or left, I guess, based on your perspective, depicts areas subject to rezoning to the new proposed TOD zone. So this is the Flatbush Station area, a little more than 40 properties included there, and then close to 70 properties here down in the Elmwood Station area. Again, Elmwood Station being in the middle here, New Britain Avenue down at the bottom, and New Park going roughly north-south. The ordinance itself provides for a number of mechanisms to try to encourage its purpose that I just discussed. One of which is to provide for reduced parking standards. Another is to provide for increased residential and building densities. And then a requirement for new buildings to be built and oriented to the street. That's very important if we're trying to create an active neighborhood environment. And it also somewhat uniquely incorporates, I apologize for, sorry, incentives to promote infill development for the creation of new public space, sustainability, access management, and affordable housing. And we'll talk about each of those things in a moment. In the development standards of the ordinance, we achieve or attempt to achieve increased residential density by reducing the amount of square feet of land per dwelling unit on a site. So a parcel's yield, currently the highest density zone we have in town, there's a number of them, but they max out at 43 units an acre, which translates into you need 1,000 square feet of land area to achieve one dwelling unit in our multifamily zones. So this is an increase from that standard, so it increases the permissible residential density under this ordinance. There is a reduction of open space requirements for those units, and that is largely because we're trying to promote public space creation as part of the ordinance. And then there is a large section, we'll go through it briefly, about parking, and a series of parking reductions from our current zoning standards, both in the dimensional space requirements, reducing down to 9 by 18 feet. And I apologize, there wasn't an easier way to fit this on the screen. Allowing for a combination of on-street parking where it's available and permitted in the district, and off-street to satisfy our zoning demand. And then really the reduced parking requirements. So this is the real meat and potatoes of the reductions as of right. And it reduces parking requirements for residential units down to 1 space per unit. Currently, anywhere else in town, we're at a 1.5 standard. Office reduction of 1 space per every 350 square feet of gross floor area. Retail and personal service, 3 per 1,000. That's over a 50% reduction in both of those. And also a reduction in the amount of parking required for both restaurants and seats. Now that's as of right under the ordinance. We also included, new to West Hartford, a minimum bicycle parking standard, because this is important with the infrastructure improvements that the town is currently underway along New Park Avenue, and also to support multimodal transit ridership, to require standards for bicycle parking for both residential, office, and other uses. Another unique feature of the TOD ordinance provides for a built-in mechanism to allow for shared parking uses. And there's 2 ways to do it with a somewhat complicated chart. The first is if someone is looking to develop under this ordinance, they could hire a transportation or traffic engineer. And if they're utilizing the Urban Land Institutes or a similar manual to do a shared parking methodology. Many times when the council is acting on a special development district, developers will come before you if there's a mixed-use component, and you'll often hear Urban Land Institute document because certain uses have different peak parking demands. So the most obvious that we could talk about would be office and residential. Generally, when people are home, they're not at work or vice versa, so those two have a good peak parking overlap where they can share. So the idea behind this is to allow for not constructing more parking than is needed in any given parcel. So you could hire a traffic engineer to provide documentation that you're doing that, or you could use this built-in table that also takes that same Urban Land Institute methodology and then does a time of day parking variation. So it tries to accomplish the same thing with a number of the uses. So it provides for pretty substantive parking reductions depending on the mix of uses on a parcel. There's a provision to require more pedestrian scaled signage as part of this ordinance. I apologize, I feel like I'm pointing this laser right at Essie and I'm going to hit her in the eye. Okay. Special design and form standards. Again, here, the first standard is an important one. It's trying to ensure that new buildings that are built under this ordinance are built up near the street, within the street wall, to create a more active pedestrian environment with buildings activating the street. They need to occupy a certain percentage of the lot. Again, we want to avoid large expanses of parking lot or other non-activated uses along these corridors. Building design, we want primary entrances of buildings to front and activate on the streets to provide that vitality and sense of place along the corridor. And then also the windows to do the same thing. So that's what that fenestration requirement in the middle is. And this does largely borrow from, but modifies what we have in place in the T&D zone, because that was a well-intentioned zone and it did have some really admirable zoning traits built into it. Another change here, we talked about increase in building density, is allowing buildings as of right to go up to 5 stories. So that's an important, we heard that from the development community, and we also, through the community engagement efforts, we found broad support within the community for up to 5 stories. And built in is a mechanism whereby if you're going to propose a 5th story, it needs to be stepped back from the parapet wall, so that way its mass is kind of concealed as a pedestrian walking up or down the street. Site access, trying to limit the number of curb cuts on a public street for each 500 feet of street frontage. So we don't want to create or replicate what we have in the corridor now of small parcels having multiple curb cuts. So a curb cut is a driveway going in or out of the parcel. And you'll see a bonus standard that we've included, but driveways are an impediment to creating a walkable, pedestrian scaled environment. The more driveways we have, the more potential conflicts we have for pedestrians, cyclists, and cars going in and out of properties. So the idea is to limit or restrict based on frontage, and then also when we talk about the bonuses, to further provide a bonus if you're able to consolidate or eliminate curb cuts that exist today. The last section of the ordinance is that bonus development standard, and within here there's a chart, and this is left up to someone that's looking, a business owner, a property owner, or a developer. Whatever's most important to them in terms of their potential development, they could choose if they want an increase in floor area ratio, so that's the volume of a building, more building coverage, more footprint on the ground, or further reductions in parking requirements. So there's a point equivalency, and we'll talk about the standards, and then there's a maximum bonus where you can add on to the underlying standards. The first bonus is access management. We had talked about trying to eliminate and create a more walkable, pedestrian-friendly environment. So if you can eliminate pre-existing curb cuts, you can get a bonus for that, or create interconnections, shared access between existing parking lots to not create unneeded parking on the backside of properties. There's a bonus standard. The next standard would be an affordable housing incentive to encourage the growth of affordable housing and mixed income within the district. Here, there are essentially two standards, one at 80% area median income and the other at 60% area median income. And one suggests if you provide for 15% of the total number of units in a development as set aside, so those are deed restricted, 30-year qualifying under 830G, you get the points there. And then at the deeper affordability level, you get more points for a smaller amount of units. The next infill development bonus standard is to encourage the development within existing parcels of parking lots or other areas of a lot that are adjacent or proximate to the street that don't have any activating uses now. So getting a bonus for developing some type of commercial mixed-use building in those areas of lots. A public space amenity standard, and this is to encourage the private development of permanently dedicated and reserved public space. We heard this was an important component when we went through our community outreach, creating more opportunities for small pocket parks. That's another way of creating pocket parks. The developer or property owner would develop them if they qualify. They'd have to be preserved, deed restricted, but then they'd be available to the public for perpetuity as long as the incentive was being used. And lastly, there is a sustainability standard if development encourages or includes green building practices with either a true green roof or a renewable energy system as part of its development proposal, they can get a bonus procedure for that. And then lastly, the application procedure. All development, with a few exceptions in this zone, would be subject to site plan or as of right administrative approval. There are a couple special use permit uses that we've carried forward from underlying zones and kept those as special use permits. Most notably, some of the drive-through ordinances that were just passed, so we kept that kind of structure in place. Are there any questions by the council on anything I've covered so far?
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Any questions for the town planner? Okay, let's keep going.
I'm almost done with my presentation. I'd like to put into the record, we have 2 referral letters, both required. One letter from CROG, and I lied. I will read 2 more things verbatim into the record. CROG letter dated 5/27. The staff of the Regional Planning Commission of the Capital Regional Council of Governments has reviewed this zoning referral and finds no apparent conflict with regional plans or policies or concerns of neighboring towns. The staff commends the efforts around mixed-use and transit-oriented development, which directly support the Regional Plan of Conservation Development's policy to encourage residential, mixed-use, and infill development around transit stations. Also, another positive referral from our Town Planning and Zoning Commission. This letter dated 6/9/22, and the TPZ recommends approval of the ordinance, finding it consistent with over a decade's worth of past planning efforts with local, regional, and state partners, and with the Plan of Conservation and Development. In particular, the Commission noted that the proposed ordinance furthers several of the POCD's suggested action items, including but not limited to the encouragement of mixed-use and higher-density developments in proximity to existing and planned transit stations and existing commercial districts, to encourage infill development on vacant and underutilized parcels, and then to review the zoning ordinances and consider the creation of a new transit-oriented development district. I would further add that all of those action items are supported and directly derived from the POCD, and further both the neighborhood and housing goal within the Plan of Conservation Development, the economic development goal, and the transportation goal. And that concludes my presentation, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. I just want to, being part of this journey for a long time, I'm sad that this is graduation night and there's not more people here. This is a very, very, very important night for the council, and you have done tremendous work over so many years to get us to this place. So this is a big deal and transformational. We do have some people ready for public comment, but is there anybody that would like to ask any questions that from the town planner? Ms. Blanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Dumais, for that great presentation. I'm pretty excited about this, and I really can't wait. I feel like a kid who are we there yet? Because I really can't wait to see the development. On the design piece, and I may have missed this, in terms of lighting for that particular area, what are we looking at? Because I know it's going to be beautiful and bright and everything, but could you just elaborate on that?
So the lighting standards don't change from the existing zoning ordinances. So they require essentially no light trespass, full cutoff, dark sky compliant. So there's no negative impact to adjacent parcels. What I think you might be asking is a related project, and that's our New Park Complete Streets Physical Infrastructure Improvement Project. And perhaps Ms. Gorski could answer, Mr. Ledwith. There is new lighting designed, incorporated as part of the design work that will reimagine the street itself, including that road diet and public amenity zone. I don't have the details of what that lighting would look like at this point, though. We could get that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Ms. Fay.
Thank you, Mayor Cantor. Mr. Dumais, just really quickly, I think this is definitely a step in the right direction and good for all of West Hartford, but especially where we're planned, where there's major public transportation. Could you give me an example, or the audience or other people, of where something like this has worked really well? For what's a comparable result of this kind of an ordinance in something nearby, or even a bigger city, or just an example so we can visualize it?
Sure. I think there are a number of examples. We could go the biggest city around, New York City. So generally speaking, if you look at development in and around any of the subway stations, it's probably the most apparent of higher development densities around those, permanent fixed transit nodes. Then if we come up the Metro North line, for example, the city of Stamford, second stop in the state, has capitalized and leveraged their Stamford Metro station, and you've seen a lot of development with both office and residential within a half-mile or quarter-mile walk of that station. And that largely holds true, and particularly in communities along the Metro North line have capitalized on this, or have had a historic development pattern that largely reflects the intent and purpose of TOD. So some of the shoreline east communities that have rail stations have kind of historic vestiges of really traditional walkable mixed-use environments that grew organically around their transit nodes. So it's kind of the Metro North example. Obviously, the Hartford line coming up our way and the Fast Track line, it's a little bit newer, but certainly downtown New Britain at one time was a transit hub, as is downtown Hartford, which is the terminus of the Fast Track station, could be examples of TOD development as well.
Yeah, thank you. Excuse me. And just a quick follow-up. You're right, we don't have the metro, we can't go into New York City well, we can, but it's an elaborate way to get there. I used to do that a lot, or to Boston even. So how much progress can we expect to see with, the buses and those kind of things, recognizing that not that I've heard of, probably, maybe there is a train station planned, West Hartford, and I fell asleep, I don't remember that, but what can we expect from something with the fast bus or fast track?
Sure.
As opposed to a train? Thank you.
It's a great question, Councilor Fay. I think actually I'd point to the Flatbush Station area because this presents a unique opportunity within the fast track corridor to create what planners or transportation engineers would call a true multimodal transportation node. So right now our Flatbush Station has a fast track line. In the future, and I think the percentage is maybe 30% design for a new train station at Flatbush. Immediately on the east side of the tracks. So on one side you'd have the fast track, the other side you'd have the Hartford line eventually, rail stations. So you could conceivably ride anywhere on the fast track, get off, cross the station to a different mode of traffic, and then get on and connect down to Metro North or Shoreline East. So it presents a really exciting and unique opportunity for not only West Hartford, but the greater region.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Anything else for the questions you'll have a time after public comment, but Ms. LeBreau, are there any written comments? Did you receive any written comments?
Yes, I received a letter in support of the ordinance from Mr. Chuck Corsi and a letter in support of the ordinance by Sammy Abanasra, owner of the Ashley Home Store Outlet located at 1061 New Britain Avenue.
Thank you very much, Ms. LeBreau. And we have some people signed up to speak. And if you are speaking as an individual, you have 3 minutes. If you represent a group, we ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes. Eric Castiglione is the first. State your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Eric Castiglione. I am speaking on behalf of the Elmwood Business Association, and I live at 17 Clifford Drive in West Hartford. The Transit-Oriented District Zone Overlay is a legal document that provides specifications for buildings and lots. It's not a plan, and it's not a design. It's only a technical specification. It's not much different than saying, I want a structure to accommodate my family of 4 that has parking for 2 cars and a lot size of 1/4 acre. You could end up with a center entry colonial, or you could end up with a double wide trailer. And while this is clearly hyperbole, the point is there's a missing piece here. In the rest of the town, that piece is provided by the Plan of Conservation and Development. While the 2020 POCD briefly mentions the areas around and to the east of the transit stations, it mentions potential opportunities. The town has made no clear statement of what it wants to see or where it wants to go. Does it want to reinforce light industry? Do we want to see housing mixed in? What about improving traffic circulation in the area? What about anticipating the development of private land, such as the access road to 635 New Park Avenue, that may eventually become interconnected with the neighborhood? If the town is truly looking to increase the grand list, this is the place to do it. But the town will have to invest in infrastructure. And if we want the TOD to be an effective ordinance, infrastructure improvements in the surrounding community also need to be made. Otherwise, the neighborhoods and landscape that you see today will substantially remain the same or become more unwieldy to manage. The TOD relies entirely on private investment to do the job. As we have seen with the traditional neighborhood design district, that's not enough. In the POCD's description of commercial and retail districts, a quadrant graph is presented. New Park Avenue South, New Britain Avenue, and the proposed transit districts are all listed in Quadrant 1. Quadrant 1's emphasis is in need of physical improvement and having low density. It's also subtitled Starting from Scratch. Since the next POCD won't be mandated until 2030, we should strive to have some guidelines in place that are specific to the transit-oriented zones and what we once called the southeast quadrant of town. Essentially, this would be a focused POCD for the southeast quadrant. This was done in the 1980s with the establishment of the Southeast Quadrant Advisory Committee, and then again in the late 90s with the Elmwood Charrettes. We could argue the Southeast Quadrant is still stuck in the 1980s. The POCD does mention working with the City of Hartford to develop mutual transit-oriented zoning, utilizing excess parking lots and establishing an opportunity zone designation. But no action has been taken and no plans are in place at this time. So what can the town do to provide the bones needed to grow a healthy neighborhood? Infrastructure that's needed includes, number one, development of streets and blocks. The southeast area of Elmwood has 3 immovable pieces that inhibit development and traffic circulation: the transit line, Trout Brook, and New Britain Avenue. The POCD named both New Park and New Britain Avenues among West Hartford's most heavily traveled corridors. And one of the goals of the TOD is to increase pedestrian and bike traffic in the area. We see a potential safety hazard here. The Complete Streets initiative allows for bike lanes, but it does nothing to mitigate traffic volume. We need alternate routes in the area. We recognize that the POCD lists in its transportation section action item 1A as explore opportunities to enhance and expand the street road network, such as extending Oakwood Avenue to New Britain Avenue to improve accessibility and reduce traffic congestion. A Shelton Avenue bridge was also suggested as an idea. Once again, the intent is there, but action is needed. This is vital to have in place for that moment 10 years from now when the present Elmwood Community Center is likely transformed into a private development. Also, adjacent to the proposed transit districts are substantial industrial areas that need to be maintained or improved. This does not necessarily mean we want to gentrify these areas, but these areas need to be easily accessible and connected with the rest of town. Number 2, development east of the transit line. East-west flow across the transit line is difficult to achieve. Because of this, the east side of the transit line needs to be improved into an area that can stand on its own as a neighborhood and not just be an ugly stepsister to the town. We urge the town to develop long-term plans to improve the areas here. Number 3, emergency services access, increased school population, social services, and sewer usage. Assuming the TOD does lead to increased population in the New Park Avenue corridor, we need to address the safety issues of fire and police access, increased busing for school population, demands for social service, and the costs of sewer usage. And number 4, the likely redevelopment of the Elmwood Community Center. The community center and the adjacent lands that could become part of any such development are covered by and adjacent to the transit-oriented design overlay zone. Additionally, they are covered by the traditional neighborhood design district overlay. This redevelopment is on the near horizon, and we need to have plans in place for a change that is almost sure to come. In conclusion, the Elmwood Business Association feels that the goals of the transit-oriented design overlay zone are worthy, but unlikely to produce change on their own. The town needs to develop a vision of what we want to see happen here and commit to planning for further infrastructure improvement. We would urge that the council commission a mini POCD that specifically targets the areas within a half mile of the transit stations and east of the transit corridor. Otherwise, for years to come, things will remain substantially the same as you see them today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Castiglione. Next, I have Mr. Liftig, Rick Liftig.
Good evening, everybody. Rick Liftig, 75 Fox Ridge Road in West Hartford. As some of you may know, this is not my first go-around with zoning ordinances in Elmwood. I was part of the group that helped craft the traditional neighborhood design ordinance almost 25 years ago. Now, from that experience, I can tell you that you don't know how these things are going to work until they're tested. The TND was never tested because it had a big loophole in its trigger clause. And I dare say the TND has inhibited development as opposed to promoting it. So what did I learn from the TND experience than watching development projects over the last 20 years? I've learned that zoning rules do not create a market. Development only takes place when market forces are favorable. On the other hand, if you have rules in place in advance of the next market surge, it's an invaluable guide and protector. I've learned if there are any weaknesses in a zoning ordinance, a clever developer and their legal team will exploit them. I've learned that without incentives, the desirability of rebuilding is lessened. And without incentives, convincing an existing property owner to redevelop their property is often a stretch. I've learned that we undervalue our businesses and what they bring to the town. A fully gentrified town is an expensive town. Locally owned businesses bring taxes, convenience, and support our community. West Hartford's many locally owned businesses are an incredible asset. I've learned that the SDD is overused. It serves some good purposes and some bad purposes. The overuse of the SDD has lent uncertainty to many adjacent property owners. And when they've found by chance that their underlying zone has been subverted. And perhaps most important of all, I've learned that things change. For example, what we consider a vehicle-intensive business in 2022 may be a totally different business in 10 to 20 years when we've shifted to electric vehicles. Demographics change and transportation patterns change. In 10 years, we may look back and say, that was a great ordinance. Just look at the neighborhood that grew up around the transit stations. Or we may look back and say, well, we meant well, but it's never been put to the test. It's just like the TND. For this reason, I feel that the biggest issue with the TND and potentially with the TOD is a lack of a mechanism to review and revise it after a certain amount of time. If the TND had been reviewed after its implementation, we could have turned it into an effective guideline as opposed to a historical footnote. In my opinion, one goal of zoning is not just to restrict use, but to develop and protect the neighborhood. I often use the example of New York City, where every few blocks you'll find a new neighborhood, and each has many uses contained within, even auto-centric uses, although they're well hidden or very attractive. As council members, your role as zoning authority is one of the more important tasks that you take on. It's not exciting, and it's usually tedious, but your actions can easily affect a neighborhood or the town for many years to come. So I thank you for your time and service, and a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Liftig. Next, I have Ed Pollack.
Good evening. My name is Ed Pollack. I'm a longtime resident of West Hartford. I'm a small business owner with my home office here in town. And earlier this year, this council appointed me to the West Hartford Pedestrian and Bicycle Commission. And in my first meeting, the commission elected me to be their chair. So needless to say, it's been an interesting learning experience, making rookie mistakes, but I'm doing my best. As you know, the Commission promotes safe, accessible, and interconnected opportunities for walking and bicycling in town. And I'm here tonight on behalf of the Ped and Bike Commission to speak in strong support of the proposed transit-oriented development zoning district. Now, the goal of the proposed TOD ordinance is to create neighborhoods that are more livable, more walkable, and more rideable. These are neighborhoods that are less dependent on motor vehicles, and they're more accessible to other sustainable modes of transportation, including walking, bicycling, bus, and train. Now, the neighborhoods that are covered by the proposed TOD zone, they have unique amenities that make them ideal candidates for this new zoning district. And these include the 2 fast-track bus stations, a planned CT rail station, easy access to the ever-growing Trout Brook Trail, as well as the upcoming complete streets improvements on New Park Avenue. I'd add to that an existing mix of really interesting existing mix of restaurants, cafes, retail, along with new residential developments. As Mr. DeMay told us, the ordinance incentivizes developers to include many desirable elements in their plans, including minimizing curb cuts, which make that neighborhood safer for pedestrians and cyclists. This ordinance it aligns with the town's plan of conservation and development, with its complete streets policy, and with the goals of the Ped and Bike Commission. Because of this, the West Hartford Pedestrian and Bicycle Commission fully and strongly supports this proposed TOD ordinance, and we urge the town council to approve it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pollock, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. I
And
have a letter I'd like to submit.
thank you. All right, and while Mr. Pollock is handing that out, the last person I have signed up on the sheet is Emily. I think it's Umano or Umano. Please feel free to correct that.
Town committee members, thank you for your willingness to hear from the public. My name is Emily Omano, 637 Prospect Ave, West Hartford, and I support the proposal to allow more housing and more types of housing to be zoned and built near public transportation. I've lived in West Hartford, just on this side of the dividing line between our town and the city of Hartford, for a few years. During that time, I've made an effort to be part of my community. I volunteered for a local community organization, I donated to the library, I support local businesses, and I paid about $47,000 in rent to my West Hartford-based property management company. Yet, despite my efforts to make a positive contribution to the town where I live, it has never really felt like home. The truth is, I plan to eventually leave West Hartford, and I plan to do so since I moved here, and I hope to relocate soon. The rent is high, and it gets higher almost every year. The commute is bad, and the drive to and from work is a cost on my time, a cost to my pocketbook, and a cost to the environment that I can't bear to pay anymore. Staying here is not a viable option for me, and it's not a good option for so many others like me because of the expensive housing and the difficult commute. Building more housing, especially more modest apartments and condos near public transportation hubs, could alleviate both of those problems. Although these changes are coming too late to prevent me from moving, I know that if these transit-oriented development land use regulations were passed and West Hartford was the more affordable, walkable, equitable community I hoped it would be, I would have more reasons to stay and fewer reasons to leave. Because of circumstances outside of my control, I never felt fully included in West Hartford. I wonder if my neighbors, who did not feel invested enough in the community to attend this meeting, might also feel the same way. If you want to create thriving, inclusive communities, we need to build the housing that people want and need. Passing this ordinance is a good place to start. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Romano. Is there anybody else that did not sign up on this to speak to this public hearing? Okay, I don't see any. All right, Mr. Dumay, why don't you come back up in case we have some questions for council? And any comments you might have on what you heard from the speakers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we heard all comments in favor of the proposed ordinance. We did hear 2 different takes, one from the EBA and one from Mr. Liftig. I don't disagree with either of those comments. What we heard is this is not a plan or not a design, and that's true. Keep in mind that zoning is a tool that implements our planning document, which is the Plan of Conservation and Development. The stated purpose is derived from the POCD. We've documented how the POCD supports the ordinance. And Eric was correct. The other critical component, and we've had countless conversations with the Elmwood Business Association, is infrastructure improvements and continued planning. So there are other plans and ideas in the POCD that should not be forgotten and should be taken up. So I think we are in agreement on that. And I'd like to commend him for his very detailed reading of the POCD and his very accurate comments. And same with Dr. Liftig. You know, the TND has a number of loopholes we try to avoid with this ordinance, but he is correct. We can't be afraid to let this ordinance, if it passes, stay without reporting back and studying. So, you know, as staff, I would offer at a minimum that we report back to the council and to our Planning and Zoning Commission with the results. If it's not every year, because development does take a while, but at least some periodic basis to report about the development that has occurred, that we know didn't occur, and try to figure out why or what we might not have gotten right. And we should revisit that to make sure it's achieving the purpose that's up there on the screen.
Thank you, and I agree with all that you just shared. So, any comments or questions for, and the sun is in my eyes, so I apologize if I'm like, I'm going to look this way. Any comments, questions? No? Okay. All right, and just to reiterate, letter dated June 9th, 2022, from Town Planning and Zoning Commission recommending approval, letter dated May 27th, 2022, from Capital Region Council of Governments finding no apparent conflict with regional plans and policies or concerns of neighboring towns. And again, any questions from the council? No questions from the council, then this public hearing is closed. Thank you very much. And I can't see the time. We are well beyond the 7:25. So I will call the 7:25 public hearing to order, and this is a resolution approving programs eligible for the Neighborhood Assistance Tax Credit Program. And we will begin with a roll call. Ms. LeBron.
Let's see if I get this right. Ms. Billings-Smith.
Present.
Ms. Blanks.
Present.
Ms. Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Cortez.
Here.
Mr. Davidoff.
Here.
Ms. Fay.
Present.
Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd. And Mr. Zdanowitz. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBron. We will begin with a presentation. First, we'll go to the town manager, and he will introduce.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Presentation.
The next public hearing is an annual hearing we hold to approve programs eligible for the Neighborhood Assistance
I think
Tax Credit
his
Program.
mic.
I'll have our... Did I have it off?
I may have turned it off from there.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the next public hearing is an annual hearing we hold to approve programs eligible for the Neighborhood Assistance Act Tax Credit Program. I'll have our Director of Leisure and Social Services, Helen Rubino-Turco, join us at the podium to give a brief overview of the process that takes place every year. For you, Madam Mayor, Ms. Rubino-Turco.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Good evening, everyone. Helen Rubino-Turco, Director of Leisure Services and Social Services. The Neighborhood Assistance Act program is a state tax credit program. It's designed to attract investment in community organizations. We do this every year. It's through the Connecticut Department of Revenue Services. We solicit eligible projects from local nonprofits, and we submit them to the DRS for inclusion. Businesses, it's very attractive for businesses to support their local community. Businesses that make donations towards these approved projects receive state tax credits in return. The town's solicitation resulted in 15 projects from 12 different local nonprofit organizations. The list has been submitted to you. And the state requires that the town council hold a public hearing, which we're doing right now, to receive feedback on these projects. And it is scheduled right before you vote on recommending the attached list, which will happen during the town council meeting in a little bit. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Rubino-Turco. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Binochuk? I mean, some of us that have been around have seen this often and yeah.
I would just add that once you approve it this evening, we will then submit the list to the Department of Revenue Services by July 1st.
Thank you. All right. Any questions or comments? No comments. All right. Seeing none, is there anybody signed up to speak to this public hearing? No, there's not. And Madam Clerk, have you received any?
I've not received any, thank you.
Okay. And again, I'm turning to my colleagues. If there's no questions, this public hearing is closed. Thank you. So I think we will take a 5-minute break and start the council meeting in a few minutes. Does that make sense? If people want that? Okay. We'll start at actually 8 o'clock sharp, so maybe get here 2 minutes before. Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag Day, too.
Yeah, it is Flag Day. And it is Flag Day, so, all right. Roll call, Ms. LeBron.
Ms. Billing-Smith?
Present.
Ms. Blanks?
Present.
Ms. Cantor?
Here.
Mr. Cortez?
Here.
Mr. Davidoff?
Here.
Ms. Fay?
Present.
Mr. Sweeney? Mr. Winograd? And Mr. Zadianowicz? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. We do have some proclamations tonight, and some have been issued and some have not, but I mean, this will be the first time, and I just want to make sure that that they are all important, and so I'm just going to sort of go. June 2nd was declared a formal day of National Gun Violence Awareness. And we do a proclamation. We've been doing a proclamation. I recognize Sarah Raskin is in the audience, and I really want to thank Sarah for being a strong advocate for us being out in front of this issue. And I am, especially I think now when we have seen so much. We continue to see violence escalate, but there's just, I think, again, more of an awareness in a very intense period of time of mass gun deaths, but there's extraordinary amounts of gun violence throughout our country, and especially in neighborhoods of color, and also high levels of suicide. And so, whereas our country is facing a worsening epidemic of gun violence and death, and in 2021, Connecticut experienced 238 gun deaths, the highest toll in more than a decade, and whereas gun homicide in Connecticut disproportionately kills people of color, so much so that blacks and Hispanics account for 84% of 2021 gun homicides, while accounting for less than 1/3 of the state's population. And whereas exposure to gun violence is a form of toxic stress that can change a child's brain development and lead to near-term and lifelong consequences, including decreased academic performance, chronic physical and behavioral health problems, substance abuse, and unstable employment. And whereas more than 80% of child firearm suicides use a gun belonging to a family member, and 2/3 of school shooters obtain the firearm they used from their home or from the home of a relative. And whereas guns have become the leading cause of death for U.S. children and teens since 2020, including the horrifying, gut-wrenching, and tragic mass shooting of 19 fourth-grade students and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. And whereas just several weeks ago, our country witnessed the targeted, racial-motivated, violent extremist mass shooting at a supermarket in Buffalo, and on average, each year in the United States, more than 10,000 hate crimes involve a firearm. And whereas beyond the intolerable loss of life and injury, gun violence costs Connecticut taxpayers $90 million annually, and more than $430 million in direct costs, and $1.2 billion in societal costs. And whereas this June 2nd is the 25th anniversary of Idea Pendleton, a teen who marched in President Obama's inaugural parade and tragically became a victim of gun violence 1 week later, following which Hadia's friends chose to wear orange on her birthday because hunters wear the color orange to protect themselves. And now, therefore, be proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council, June 2nd, as Gun Violence Awareness Day, and urge all elected leaders to have the courage and commitment to adopt common sense gun safety legislation to protect our communities across the country. And I just want to give my thanks to Senator Murphy for his leadership on this issue, and for the also the leaders throughout the country, from both parties, who are moving forward on common sense gun legislation. Hopefully, this is just the start. Okay, next proclamation is Men's Health Month. Very important, and I have 5 men in my immediate family, so very important to me. Whereas despite advances in medical technology and research, men continue to live an average of 5 years less than women, with Native American and African American men having the lowest life expectancy. Whereas COVID-19 variants continue to spread across the country, with the Centers for Disease Control reporting that males are more likely to die from this pandemic. And whereas encouraging safe behaviors, including social distancing, wearing masks, and being vaccinated, will help stop the spread of COVID-19. And whereas educating the public and healthcare providers about the importance of a healthy lifestyle and early detection of male health problems will result in reducing rates of mortality from disease. And whereas men are educated about the value that preventative health care can play in prolonging their lifespan and their role as productive family members will be more likely to participate in health screenings. And whereas fathers who stay connected to their children and maintain a healthy lifestyle are role models for their children and have happier, healthier children. And whereas Men's Health Network worked with Congress to develop a national men's health awareness period as a special campaign to help educate men, boys, and their families about the importance of positive health attitudes and preventative health practices. And whereas West Hartford Men's Health Month will focus on a broad range of men's health issues, including heart disease, mental health, diabetes, prostate, testicular and colon cancer, and the citizens of the city are encouraged to increase awareness of the importance of a healthy lifestyle, regular exercise, and medical checkups. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council and the residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby recognize June as Men's Health Month and encourage all of our citizens to pursue preventative health practices and early detection throughout the year. And then we had a Pride Month proclamation that was read at a flag raising, but I think will be read again at our Pride Fest. Whereas the town of West Hartford supports the rights of every citizen to experience equality and freedom from discrimination. And whereas lesbian, gay, queer, bisexual, and transgender Pride Month is observed every June, and this year's theme is Unapologetically Us. Many have focused on exploring their true selves, coming out to the world with vibrant and loving hearts and souls to the open public, no matter how scary, unsure, or vulnerable it might have been. And whereas all people, regardless of age, gender identity, race, color, religion, marital status, national origin, sexual orientation, or physical challenges, have the right to be treated on the basis of their intrinsic value as human beings. And whereas the town of West Hartford believes a diverse population leads to a more vibrant community, and whereas we as a society are learning, understanding, embracing, and including definitions of sexuality and gender, and recognize that education and awareness remain vital to end discrimination and prejudice. And whereas June is National Pride Month to commemorate a riot in 1969 at the Stonewall Inn in Manhattan that is thought to be the beginning of the gay liberation movement in the United States. And whereas the town of West Hartford will raise, and did raise, the pride flag representing light, healing, sun, calmness, art, and spirit in front of City Hall for the month of June. And now therefore be it proclaimed, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby proclaim June 2022 as Lesbian, Gay, Queer, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Month. I call upon our community to eliminate prejudice and bias everywhere it exists and to celebrate our diversity. And then the last is Juneteenth. This will be shared on this June 19th proclamation, and I'll share it now and then again on, is that okay? Looking at our organizer. So, whereas the town of West Hartford is learning about the recently discovered painful history of the individuals that were once enslaved in this town. This research teaches us that foundations that built this town included enslaved individuals. We recognize these individuals on this June 19, 2022, known as Juneteenth, which marks the day in 1865 that the last enslaved people of our country were informed of their freedom after signing of the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. And whereas we affirm their freedom from the chains of invisibility and bondage, and forever recognize their agency, human rights, and contribution to our town, and fully condemn the actions of those who chose to enslave other human beings. And whereas the hard work and countless hours of effort to the Witness Stone West Hartford project, initiated in 2018 under the auspices of the Noah Webster House and West Hartford Historical Society, and the many students and community members of West Hartford who have dedicated their time and have helped to tell the individual stories of 50 enslaved people, including the story of Bristow. And I did see our town historian, Tracy Wilson, in the audience, and Tracy has been initiator of this project and a leader throughout this project, so thank you, Tracy. Whereas the town of West Hartford is forever committed to recognizing the descendants of individuals and their contribution to our town, many of whom died without the title of a free person they so richly deserved. And whereas the town of West Hartford is forever indebted to the individuals listed below, and recognizes that its foundation was built on the individuals that have been identified with witness stones and many others who died with their names yet to be discovered. Jude, George, Chris, Bristow, Prout, Paige, Pompey, Ben, Caesar, Hannibal, Simone, Hercules, Dinah, Lyde, Jack, York, Lou, Kate, Caesar, Sarah, Coffee, Greenville, Coffee, Ned, Reuben, Dinah, Boy, Infant, Sam, Neptune, Peter, Phoebe, Peleg, Knott, Rachel, Knott, Frank, Ransom, Chloe, Hagar, Bristow, Hagar, Lil, child of Lil, Silva, Ismael, child of Silva, Boy, Ambo, Plymouth, Prime, Titus, Thomas, and Julia Thomas. Now therefore be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council and the residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby recognize and commemorate Juneteenth in the town of West Hartford and remember the enslaved individuals of this town and throughout our country, and remember those who were last informed of their freedom on June 19th, 1865. And again, the celebration and recognition of Juneteenth will be celebrated on Sunday, June 19th. The formal ceremony starts at 1:30, but the Witness Stone Project will begin at 12:30. And I want to thank Adrian Billing-Smith for her leadership on this and for all the work that she has done to enlighten us all and bring us together as a community to recognize and mark this special day. And with that, we will now go to the public forum. Any resident or taxpayer of the town may address the town council regarding any item on the agenda which is not otherwise subject to a public hearing. I just do want to recognize that before we begin the public forum, we have we might have a couple people here that want to speak to item 10A, an application to rename Sycamore Lane to Peleg Knott Lane. And while you are more than welcome to speak on this item, I just want to note that we need a little more time to resolve some legal questions about this with a vote before TPZ. Again, you're more than welcome to make the comment on this matter, but I don't believe we will be taking any final action on it tonight. You will have the opportunity to address the council on the matter when it appears again on the town council agenda. So we have 3 people signed up to start. The first is Tracy Wilson. Please state your name and address for the record. And 3 minutes to speak, 5 minutes if you're representing a group.
Hi, my name is Tracy Wilson, 251 Ridgewood Road. And first, I just want to thank the town council for your service. Just sitting here for the last half hour, you have to be experts on so many things. And I know you're all volunteers, and I really appreciate your service. I am here to speak on the issue of changing the name of Sycamore Lane to Peleg Knott Lane, and I do know you're not voting on it, but just to keep the name alive here, since the TPZ's 3-1 vote on June 6th, and they're passing the vote to the council, there have been questions about the TPZ's process. I would argue anyone who left the meeting last Monday thought the town would change the name from Sycamore Lane to Peleg Knott Lane, including the 3 men who spoke on the lights for the baseball field at Walcott Park, who congratulated the Isaias Wooden, who's the applicant. So the feeling after that meeting was very much that that they had voted in favor. Since then, this last week, questions about the process have overridden, I think, the purpose of the ordinance, the historical naming of the streets. The purpose of this ordinance is to help change the cultural landscape of this town, and no one thought that this would be done without opposition. The applicant, Isaias Wooden, can't be here tonight because he is ill. Isaias continues to put his faith in the elected officials here, and his teacher, David Baker, will speak on his behalf. It's no coincidence that until a month ago, we had no streets in this town named after people who were enslaved. This naming of streets has been trivialized by many as an inconsequential gesture, as a peripheral matter. I argue this action comes to the heart of what makes a town a community. Changing the name is an action you can take for the common good. There are many ways that a community's members are inconvenienced when the goal is to build a more just and equitable community. This is one of those cases. We know that the property owners on the street agree that Peleg Knott should be commemorated. We invite them to embrace this change, and then they can be part of telling Peleg Knott's story. This would leave a great legacy of justice that could be really powerful. I hope that the machinery of government will lead to the enforcement of this ordinance, and that we can, as Isaias believes, put our faith in the elected officials, in the ordinance, and those who carry it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Next person we have is David Baker, I think. Yes, Mr. Baker. Yes. Sorry about that. I was.
Hi, my name is David Baker, and I live at 71 Hartwell Road. I'm a lifelong resident of West Hartford, and I am currently the History Department Chair at Kingswood Oxford School. Over the past 2 years, I have witnessed and then supported Isaias and his classmates in their search to learn of Peleg Knott's past and their mission to recognize his accomplishments in a public and permanent way. Isaias and his classmates' research goes all the way back to the 2020-2021 school year, when they not only investigated Knott's life, but also considered ways to bring his story to life as part of the Witness Stones project, with their U.S. history teacher, Katie McCarthy, also present here today. Their research, along with the research of students at King Philip Middle School, led to calls for creating an ordinance that would enable street names to be changed in honor of historic figures. Thank you for developing this ordinance and providing opportunities for our residents to engage in public history and better recognize the story of West Hartford. During the 21-22 school year, this past one, Isaias and his peers began researching various streets to rename in honor of Peleg Knott. By early spring, Isaias Wooden realized that Sycamore Lane would be the most fitting street for honoring Peleg Knott. I'm here to speak on behalf of Isaias Wooden, who is the applicant for the historic street renaming of Sycamore Lane as Peleg Knott Lane, which was passed by a 75% in favor vote last week on Monday, June 6th. Isaias, unfortunately, is ill and cannot be here. This is in the words of Isaias. To our town council, I do not think postponing this vote is the right action. The TPZ has passed the vote. We have taken all the correct actions and steps listed in the ordinance. Everything has been put on the table. Now is the time for us to hold up the democratic principles this nation is built on. I urge you to vote today, not because I'm certain you will vote for or against the proposal, but because of the precedent it will set in future cases. Postponing this vote will not change a thing, though I hope in your ultimate decision you choose to stay true to your beliefs and uphold justice. So that's from Isaias. Ultimately, the application to rename Sycamore Lane is about our town and its history. To Isaias, it's not about winning an argument or getting something he wants. It's about honoring a man who, against all odds, served his country and his community even when the cards were stacked against him. It's about honoring West Hartford's marginalized populations that time and time again were dismissed, discriminated against, or considered lesser than, yet still helped build this town and found ways to lead dignified lives. Sycamore Lane does not belong to any one resident of West Hartford. The road belongs to the town of West Hartford and is a part of our collective history. All parties involved in this discussion at the TPZ meeting, both those in favor and those opposed, have noted that Peleg Knott should be honored. All present at that hearing last week believe that his story needs to be told and celebrated, and we believe that Peleg Knott deserves a street named after him. The course is clear. Renaming a street will always be an inconvenience for a town and for its residents. But honoring a hero from West Hartford's past, particularly one who represents historically marginalized communities in our town, is of the utmost importance. Peleg Knott deserves more, and I urge the town council to do the right thing and rename Sycamore Lane as Peleg Knott Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. The next speaker is Tracy Frankel. Okay, I think Tracy meant to sign up on the TOD. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Mr. Fleischman? State your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, and members of the council, my name is Carl Fleischman. I live at 1055 Prospect Avenue, which is the corner of Sycamore Lane. And I don't expect to speak 5 minutes, but I am speaking on my own behalf and on behalf of the 4 people who own property abutting Sycamore Lane. I know that the town historian and the teachers and the students have gone back in history, but I think they could have gone back a little further. Peleg Knott, as it turns out, is mentioned, Peleg is mentioned in Genesis. And in Genesis, it turns out that Peleg lived to be 239 years. Depending upon which translation you like, if you read the Greek translation, it's 339 years. And so it may well be that he deserves to be memorialized here, either 239 years after his death, but the question is whether he should be memorialized on Sycamore Lane. From the very beginning, it seems to me, people who wanted to rename Sycamore Lane should have talked to the people who live on Sycamore Lane. That seems to be a piece of basic good sense. Why would you want to come from the other side of town, as do the proponents and the petitioners who signed the application, and tell someone else that their name, the name of their street, should be changed? I can't imagine why anyone in a teaching position would think that's the way to go about renaming a street. It seems to me the way you go about it is, if you think that a given street is the appropriate street to rename, you talk to the people who live there and who have an interest in it, as I do. I have a little outbuilding on my property, which I use as an office, and I get all kinds of correspondence there. Bills, financial statements, bank statements, you name it. I get prescriptions delivered there. It would be a morass for me to tell the post office, not the post office, excuse me, to tell all of my correspondents that they should no longer use the name Sycamore Lane. And it is not I alone who have addresses there. Dr. Costo, who is here tonight, Mrs. Costo is here with him. The Blake family and the West family all have are all abutters. West has a rental apartment, which is number 4. His tenant has sent a letter to the council objecting. Dr. Costo himself lives at number 1. He doesn't have a tenant at the moment at number 3. But all of us think that it was unreasonable for people with a good idea to impose that upon the people most involved in the street in question. And it seems particularly inappropriate for teachers implicitly to teach their students that the way to go about change is to come up with an idea and then gung-ho rename a street without ever asking the people who live on that street. That just seems to me an awful lesson to teach young people. This is a democracy, and there are ways to go about making change in democracy, and the principal way is to build consensus. Now, as to all the people who attended the meeting of the TPZ, including the people who are relighting the baseball field, and I support that, who believed that 3-1 was a sufficient majority of the TPZ. And I can understand why you would think that. 3-1 is a pretty substantial showing. Nevertheless, the ordinance says that in order for the TPZ to make a favorable recommendation, 2/3 of the members must support it. Well, the TPZ has 5 members. 3/5 is 60%. It is not 2/3. So I suggest that as much as the council might like to consider this matter, it is inappropriately before the council. It has not received the required 2/3 vote in the TPC. My own suggestion is that if the matter comes to a vote, if it cannot be resolved in some fashion short of a vote, that the council might rule on multiple grounds, alternative grounds. One is that it is not appropriately before the council. Alternatively, that because the process by which the whole suggestion came about was so undemocratic that it should not be approved, and that the proponents should go back to the drawing board and see if they can find another solution, another way to memorialize Pelagnat that does not infringe upon the interests of people who should have been consulted but never were.
Thank you, Mr. Fleischman. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to an item on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we go to number 4, Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Without objection, I move we place items 5A, 5B, 5C, 10B on consent.
Is there any objection?
Madam Mayor, I move adoption of the consent calendar.
Okay, motion is moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent calendar is adopted. Number 6, Mr. Sweeney.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move adoption of the ordinance establishing the transit-oriented development zoning district.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. I'll ask the town manager to provide a brief overview of what we will.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As everyone knows, this was the subject to a public hearing earlier this evening, where our town planner, Mr. Dumais, provided an overview of this ordinance that establishes a transit-oriented development zoning district. This ordinance has been reviewed extensively and approved by our Community Planning and Economic Development Committee, and received, as Mr. Dumais outlined, a positive referral from the Town Plan and Zoning Commission at its June 6th meeting, where the commission noted that the proposed ordinance furthers several of the plan of conservation and development suggested action items, including but not limited to, and I'd like to repeat this again because I think it bears worth repeating, as outlined by Mr. Dumais. Encourage mixed use and higher density development in proximity to existing and planned transit stations in existing commercial districts. Encourage infill development on vacant and underutilized lots. And review the zoning ordinance and consider the creation of a new transit-oriented district. And as was presented in the hearing, there was significant community engagement process that started back in the spring of 2021 and culminated with an informal presentation at the Elmwood Business Association meeting on June 3rd. And I will say, even prior to Dr. Liftig's and Mr. Castiglione's comments, which I certainly respect as well, every conversation that I've had with Mr. Dumais involved the action of coming before the town council and TP&Z in the future with updates as to the progress of this, what we would describe as a very transformational ordinance. And as Mr. Dumais said, certainly we need to see some development there before we can talk about the impact of this ordinance, but we're excited about the possibility about what may be occurring down in that New Britain Avenue, New Park Avenue corridor. And I do think that within the next year or two, we could be back before the council and TP&Z to talk about how this is unfolding before us. So At this point, I will turn it back to you, Mayor, for your discussion with the council.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwith. Any comments on this? Mr. Cortez.
To you, Madam Mayor. It's more of a comment. I see a vision of this. I've seen this around, the country. Washington, D.C. comes to mind when I see this. It's already happened. But, I stated before, it's up to, government officials to put, to come up with the support to make this happen, as far as, attracting the right fit for these things. And, I have a vision, and it would be nice to see it come through, and for us not to forget this, to vote this on, and then 5-10 years from now, it's just an ordinance, and that's it. There is growth in this town that I see, but not this kind of growth, and this is something that could be exciting. So I hope that we stay on top of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cortez. I appreciate it. Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to just thank Mr. DeMay for all of his work on this. This is one of the things that I think we can all kind of agree can be very thankless. And this is a super important thing that we're doing for the town, as well as Kristen, thank you for the work on this. This is a huge part of why West Hartford remains above the other communities, as we continue to take these steps to involve looking towards the future in regards to policy and how we're going to grow. And I just wanted to acknowledge that the amount of time that was put into this, the amount of, I don't sit on the committee that's pertinent to this, but we've had joint meetings of the full council to talk about this, and a bunch of different types of input. But I just wanted to acknowledge the hard work, because you guys don't get all the credit, but there's a lot of time you put into this, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. So thank you guys for your work and for your service to the town, and Mr. Lewitt for keeping them on this, and appreciate everything that the town staff has done to bring us today.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be brief, I promise. But I am excited. It has been quite a long struggle, a lot of work. And again, to echo Mr. Sweeney's comments, staff has been fantastic, and Ms. Gorski and Mr. DeMay, a whole lot of work on this, and Todd in particular had to put up with a lot of questions, a lot of pushback. We saw a couple times showing us pictures of possible designs and trying to get feedback on from a council that was kind of pushing back at times, and really trying to move things along. And but sometimes you have to make sure you get it right. And I think that you've done that. Obviously, no ordinance is perfect, but we have to start somewhere. And I think this is a really great start. Just want to make a couple of comments. Listen, when we do zoning, when we put rules in place, those add costs, and often they prevent development. So parking regulations is certainly one of the ones nationally is talked about a lot, about how parking can prevent projects from being built because it makes it too expensive. To reduce parking is a big deal. And obviously that goes along with the transit-oriented development, but it's a trend in the right direction. Surface parking is not only expensive for land costs, it's also environmentally harmful. Anything we can do to reduce that is an advantage, and again, this will be something really we can be proud of. And in terms of again, what we do with zoning, and to the extent that we can add as of right building, it reduces legal costs, it reduces some of the handicaps we put in the way. We want to make sure developers get it right, but we also, if we go too far, it prevents them from coming at all. And to Mr. Castiglione's legitimate concern, the hope is that by reducing some of those barriers, private development will in fact increase, and I'm fairly confident that it will. Let me just, in terms of personal anecdote, or just when we talk about transit-oriented development, it seems like some new idea. I took the bus today to the council, seemed appropriate. I live a few doors from Farmington Avenue. Buses are free right now, so it's particularly convenient to jump on and ride. But if you go down Farmington Avenue, because we used to have a streetcar, and you see apartment buildings down that stretch. There's a reason there are apartment buildings on Farmington Avenue. It was a very convenient way to get downtown where the jobs were, or to go in the other direction. These were, at the time, a combination. They were affordable options. They were not, they were more expensive ones. But again, those were developed because there was a line there. And I think what we're doing here is encouraging sort of a 21st century version of the streetcar. And I think we're, big step in the right direction of creating in that corridor that kind of vibrancy we see on Farmington Avenue. So again, thank you for staff's work, and certainly urge everyone's support for this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Mr. Zdanowitz.
I guess I had a question first, and because I've heard a couple dates, but this goes back as far as 2020, some of this back, right? Yeah, I'm getting a head nod. So I guess, and I appreciate that. Councils look different 2 and 3 years ago, and they look different now, and I guess there was some apprehension in the beginning, and I don't know all the history on this, but I want to. And, I feel everything I've been witnessed and told and briefed on recently, yeah, I get it, right? But there's some long-standing history, and this council looks much different than it did 2 years ago. So if there's any way to bring us maybe up to speed with a Reader's Digest from the beginning through it. So, because if we are going to be responsible for making the decisions, I think it would be a good idea that we had all the information. Not necessarily have you done that in the past, I'm not sure, but for someone that's new to the council and is a different person on this council than was when this started, I know I would appreciate a more detailed information on its history and how we got there and why we got there, and that long term, what's it going to look like 10 years. We, from the school Board of Ed where I came from, we had a model of continuous improvement, and I think I would like to see the same thing on zoning as well, continuous improvement. If something works, you move forward. If it doesn't, we have the flexibility to change. There's an old statement I used to use: you can go full steam ahead at glacier speed, or you can be a speedboat. And speedboats make corrections very quickly. Icebergs don't. And I think that's important. We're a big environment here, and sometimes we have to go slower, but we don't have to go full steam ahead glacier speed either. So just my 2 cents, and maybe we can discuss that further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zdanowitz. I think, we did have a public hearing on this, but I think going forward, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to.
No, agreed. I mean, we had the public hearing today. For me, it was the tip of the iceberg. It wasn't the whole, to use my, but so yeah, no, I perfectly, I got the information, I absorbed it, but I still think that there's a lot of information to make these kind of decisions that we could use. And going forward, if that's the case, then that's great.
Thank you, Mr. Zdanowitz. Ms. Fay, do you have?
No.
Nothing. Okay. Anybody? Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd first like to begin by thanking Mr. Dumais and his staff, Mr. Martin and his staff, Ms. Gorski and her staff, Town Manager Ledwith and his staff, Corporation Council and their staff for all the hard work that took place to get us to this evening. I'd like to thank my colleagues on the committee that looked at this ordinance, and I'd also like to thank my colleague, Mayor Cantor, who served alongside me for a very long period of time and can relate to a lot of the issues and discussions and items that are in the TOD ordinance this evening. I come at this from serving on the Town Planning and Zoning Commission for 4 years in the early and mid 2000s to my years of service here on the council, where zoning and development have made West Hartford what West Hartford is today. It was from there that outdoor dining made its debut here in West Hartford, and we all have seen how that has made West Hartford the draw of the region, and it continues to bring people to West Hartford. So that's just one example of zoning going well. And tomorrow morning we'll have a meeting that will talk about economic development opportunities coming out of COVID, and the report is so positive that we don't have enough space in West Hartford to accommodate all the people and businesses that want to come here. People want to live here, they want to raise their families, they want to work here, and they want to play here. We had a very extensive process with our plan of conservation and development. It took longer than we had anticipated, but it was a well thought out document that acts as a roadmap for the next decade of development here in the town of West Hartford. This particular ordinance had significant community engagement. I can remember online surveys that had diagrams asking people what their preferences were with respect to building, high density, location to the street, public spaces, sustainability. And I would say that the only other zoning ordinance that had as much scrutiny as this one was our Complete Streets ordinance when I served with Mayor Slifka, Mrs. Casperson, Mrs. Cantor, Mr. Captain, and Mrs. Kendall. And there were also members of the Republican side, and that passed unanimously. And every year we get a report from the Town Planning and Zoning Commission as to Complete Streets. And let me just remind everybody, Complete Streets deals with a view that when we undertake any type of road construction, we look at the interests of pedestrians, bicyclists, cars, mass transit. We want to remain this vibrant community, but we have to recognize that all of those modes of transportation are interconnected. And we do, and when we have these development proposals come here, we look at each one of these components. This ordinance in particular takes it one step further. It looks at how does mass transit and mass transit hubs influence people's ability to walk, to bike, to drive, or use other mass transportation. So while we have two stations, Flatbush and Elmwood in West Hartford, and hopefully somebody in the legislature or governor's mansion's listening, a CT rail station so that our residents can get to New Haven or Shoreline East quicker would be a huge win-win. And as was noted during the public hearing in answer to Councilwoman Fay's question, all one has to do is look at major metropolitan areas and notice that those areas near transit stations have lots of development. They have a lot of vibrancy, people getting off the train or off mass transit vehicles. Will shop, will eat, will play, will work. You don't need a car. And this really touches something dear to my heart. My two daughters who grew up here in West Hartford, suburban West Hartford, now reside in Chicago and in New York. Neither one of them owns an automobile. They have no desire to own an automobile. They think it's nuts that people own automobiles. You have to worry about parking, maintenance, taxes, insurance. And all those dollars that would be spent on that, they're able to enjoy by doing experiences, dining, traveling, eating, visiting museums, and living in vibrant neighborhoods. So if it's something that works in our major metropolitan areas, as the example, I'm certain that it can work on a smaller scale here in West Hartford. So this ordinance, I support it 100%. There's been so much work done on it. Has the housing component, the public space component, the revitalization component. It's environmentally friendly, it's transformative, it's comprehensive. It will support organic opportunities. for economic development. And for all those reasons, I would encourage my colleagues to support this. And I'm telling you that this is so similar to the Complete Streets that when we will look back on this, you will say that one of the greatest achievements of your council career was supporting the TOD ordinance, because those who supported the Complete Streets ordinance, we still talk about how that was one of the most significant things that we ever accomplished during our tenure on the town council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Ms. Fay?
Thank you, Mayor Cantor, and all those who went before me. I hope you could tell when I first addressed the public hearing, I am supportive of this. I think development that's going to encourage people to use public transit, things that are going to bring people to the shops and all the everything we talked about. Obviously, if they're on foot or bike, it's going to be easier to get around. I think I'm hoping with density and housing comes along, some affordability for the folks who work in our town, who can't. I heard the prior speaker, different issue, but it is concerning when people don't think our town is affordable. And she seemed like a nice lady. It would have been nice if we could have kept her. So I'm hoping that's part of it as well. But I support this. I think we have to think bigger and longer term than we have been. My question for the answers and thanks for the transportation part, I was hoping that we could find a smaller city, like I don't know, maybe this is not a good example either, but a Providence or something, where these buses and other things are helping us. We start, I don't know when the train line's coming through. That would certainly be a significant thing. I would utilize that. I travel to New York quite often and Boston. That would be great for someone like me. So I think it's good. I understood Mr. Liftig's questions and concerns. We do have to monitor this and stay on top of it. I think we did spend a significant time, and Mr. Zidane, it was before your time, on the whole concept. We sat through, if I remember correctly, two 2-hour sessions, picking the plan apart and analyzing that. So the time was put in. I'm supportive. I'm cautiously optimistic that it's going to create the vibrancy and the things that we want. But I do support this, and I think we just have to keep a really, really good eye on it to make sure that it's shaping up the way that our visions are. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Ms. Blanks?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I know that many of us have went ahead and thanked the staff, but Todd, I really want to thank you and the entire staff, especially for the presentation, because I know what that takes. And a lot of times it's usually the speaker before the mic who kind of gets all the accolade, and the staff who really went and did that heavy lifting kind of, are left behind. So I know what that takes. And in terms of all of your PowerPoints, I know many people behind the scenes probably had a number of drafts and rewrite before you got it perfect. So thank you for that and all the hard work that you put into this over the years and to get us to this point. I'm excited because I live in this community and I walk New Park and New Britain Avenue, and I know many other people who are saying to me, because they know that I'm on the council, so what's happening and when are we going to see some new development? So people are really looking forward to this and excited. And like Ben, since CT Transit is free, I have taken advantage of it. And I mean, wow, this has been like an eye-opening for me, because I was just taking the CT Transit side, and then someone at work says, oh, where are you going? You can take Fast Track from right here. And it does the whole connection at the different stations. So I'm excited to hear what more is coming in terms of our future. And because I work for the health department, I know how important physical activity and exercise is, especially during this pandemic where many of us have suffered because of respiratory conditions. And here again, this would allow for the reduction of car uses and reduction of emissions and all those things that are in our environment that contributes to our respiratory ailments. And then I look forward to the number of businesses and restaurants and just the walkability in this particular area for the community, but as well as for the draw from other people and from other places. Over this weekend for Celebrate West Hartford, I met a couple of young people, and they asked if I lived in town, and I said yes. They said, you know what, I'm trying to move here. I really would like to move here. I've looked at other places. I'm from, the southern part of the state, but I like West Hartford. My job is relocating to Hartford, and I would really like to live here. But it's expensive, right? So that's what we're hearing from younger folk, that it's expensive, it's not affordable. And so with what we are creating right now and keeping that affordability in mind, I mean, we can really knock this out of the park, especially if we're thinking about 5 years into the future, 10 years into the future, 20 years into the future. We may not be here, but we have to think about those that are coming behind us. And also for our teachers and many people who work right here in town who want to be able to get around using mass transportation. So I think this is a win-win. I really do. And I do agree with Dr. Leftig, as we move forward, we do need to have a tool in place to evaluate and to make modifications as we move along the way, because things do change, right? Because look where we are here in 2022 opposed to where we were in 2020 and 2019. So I think that is something that we do need to keep in mind. But again, I'm excited about all the possibilities that are about to come and about to take off. And I will be supporting this. So again, thank you for all the hard work that you all have contributed in making sure that this reaches the stage where we are right now.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Anything else? I would just like to reiterate the thanks and the effort. This was really a long, continuous effort to draft the ordinance, revise it, do public outreach, come back, revise it again, do more public outreach. And it's really has been a significant investment of time by our town staff. Kristen Gorski has been very involved in this, and led by our town planner, Todd Dumais. So I thank you. I think this is transformational for this area. I think this is something the state tried to do on a statewide basis, but we're doing it where we can. And I really do hope this sets the stage and puts us on we are on the plans for a train station, but I also think that this effort and this ordinance will highlight how important it is to West Hartford and how we are planning around this kind of multimodal transportation. This has been in the works a long time, since the complete street policy. We always had this vision that this area in town needed more density. It called for it. It needed improvements. It is more livable than it's functioning right now. And the TND was not working as intended. And a lot of time went by, and I would also agree with Mr. Castiglione, Mr. Liftig, that can't happen again, that we have to revisit and make sure if something doesn't work, that we work on it and we correct it. And there was this ordinance, I think, is really well done. No ordinance is perfect and might need to be readdressed at times. That again, but having it being a living document and working with it, I think, is important. The access management, reducing curb cuts, increasing the walkability, having incentives for that, affordable housing incentives, infill development incentives, public space, and connections to the Trout Brook Trail, which has been a significant also effort and investment for the town, and obviously the commitment to sustainability. All of those things make this better. It also is so important that we are promoting and encouraging rehabilitation, redevelopment, and adaptive reuse, because that's what that area needs. It has a lot of authenticity, and it's a great location, so close to so much. And I do think it could be a little bit of Brooklyn in West Hartford and on the Hartford line. So I am excited about the future of this. I do think we are going to see a development fairly soon after this is publicized and well known. I think it will create the vibrancy that we are looking for in that area in town. But if it doesn't, we will go back and we will figure out why not. But again, I also don't, like Mr. Castiglione said, this is not a plan. It is a zoning, it's a zoning ordinance that sets the stage. Now the play has to happen, and the plan has to happen, and that will take some time with property owners as well as town staff interacting with the businesses that exist there now, future businesses that are joining in, future development. So, and very excited. All right. So with that, we will go to a roll call vote. Ms. LeBreau.
Ms. Billing-Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Blanks?
Yes.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Ms. Fay?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
And Mr. Zadanowitz?
Yes.
It is adopted unanimously.
Thank you so much. And we will give you all the information you want, Mr. Zadanowitz. Talking of, maybe we explained it and you were talking. I don't know. Okay. Number 7, new business. Mr. Sweeney.
Madam Mayor, I move adoption of the resolution approving programs eligible for the Neighborhood Assistance Act Tax Credit Program.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. I'll ask the town manager to just provide a brief overview.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This was subject to a public hearing earlier this evening where our Director of Leisure and Social Services provided an overview of the Connecticut Neighborhood Assistance Act Tax Credit Program, which provides funding for municipal and tax-exempt organizations by providing a corporation business tax credit for businesses who make cash contributions to these entities. The town has publicized this program like we do every year and solicited proposals from community groups. This year we had 12 organizations participate in this program. And I'll turn it back to you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ledwith. Any comments, questions? With that, we will, do we go to, yeah, we have to do a roll call.
I said voice, we can do voice vote.
Oh, we can, okay. All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we go to B. Mr. Sweeney.
Yes. Madam Mayor, I move adoption of a resolution accepting an urban development project grant to support the construction of a new athletic facilities at Hall High School and Conard High School.
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Ledwith, would you like to just give us a brief
Thank you,
overview?
Madam Mayor. We're actually a little excited to talk about this resolution because there is a little bit of a backstory here. You may recall when we presented our budget, or I presented the town manager's budget in early March, we did have the replacement of the Conard and Hall High School tennis courts in the CIP program. There are 12 courts at Hall, 12 courts at Conard. Both were 25 years old. Both had well exceeded the useful life. And we had been expending about $50,000, $60,000 a year in keeping up and maintaining the courts so that they were playable for the tennis seasons. Thanks to the collaboration between our West Hartford delegation, Senator Slack, Representatives Exum, Farrar, and Gilchrist, and of course our mayor and town council, we were able to receive 100% funding of this important community project from the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and we will no longer need to bond through our CIP to complete this project. So we're issuing working on the RFP right now. We'll have that completed by the end of the month, and we are projected to have both courts, all 12 courts at each school, finished by October of this year. So we'll be ready for late fall and certainly ready for next spring for the tennis season. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwith, and I want to echo our thanks to the delegation and the governor's office for approving this and something that benefits not only our high school athletes, but the whole community. So it's really important. All right. Any other comments, questions? All right. All those in favor, say aye. 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 Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the resolution's adopted. We will go now to the report from town manager.
Thank you. I will begin the town manager's report with a update on some upcoming meetings tomorrow morning At 8 a.m., we have our community, June 15th, we have our community planning and economic development meeting, which will be virtual. Thursday evening, June 16th, we will hold our Public Works Facilities and Sustainability meeting at 6 p.m. at the Department of Public Works, where we'll have an opportunity to tour the campus. Monday, June 20th, we will hold our Human and Community Services meeting at 6 p.m., and that will be virtual. And then our next town council meeting will take place on Tuesday, June 28th at 7:30 p.m. right here in council chambers. This past weekend, many of us were there. We successfully welcomed Celebrate West Hartford back to town after a 2-year hiatus. The weather cooperated as the rain held off until after the festival ended on Sunday night, and an estimated 35,000 residents and visitors walked the grounds of Town Hall. Everyone I personally talked to commented on the energy and excitement that was in the air throughout the weekend. This event, as we know, does not happen without the extraordinary commitment and dedication of a large number of employees and volunteers leading up to the event, and then spending their entire weekend here on site, ensuring that the event runs smoothly for everyone. A very special thanks to our leisure services staff for their efforts in coordinating this memorable event, our police and fire departments for their visible presence throughout the weekend, ensuring a safe environment for all of us, our public works and plant facility staff helping to maintain operations leading up to and throughout the weekend, community development, risk management, public relations, our tax office, and of course our fire marshal's office and information technology for all of their behind the scenes work. In addition, this event does not happen without volunteers. So a very special thank you goes to our Celebrate West Hartford committee, and then our community emergency response team as well, who were all on site all weekend long as well. The town of West Hartford participated in the Governor's Emergency Planning and Preparedness Initiative statewide exercise on May 24th, 2022. The tabletop exercise focused on our hurricane response. The fire department and Office of Emergency Management led a cross-departmental team through various hazard scenarios, including strong winds, heavy rainfall, flooding, and evacuation. Personally, this exercise was very meaningful to me, as this was my first time being involved in an emergency of this nature, and it was a situation that involved the state as well as the federal government as well. So seeing our team in action in this tabletop exercise inspired a lot of confidence for me and our team in the event that we do have to someday face something like this. So Health District was awarded a $100,000 Block COVID-19 grant. And we were one of 24 local health departments to receive that $100,000 funding through the Building Local Operational Capacity for COVID-19. West Hartford, the town of West Hartford was chosen by the sponsors of Energize Connecticut to receive a $20,000 grant through the Community Partnership Initiative. In an effort to make energy efficiency affordable and accessible to all, the grant will fund a Heat Smart campaign run by a local nonprofit, People's Action for Clean Energy. The second Community Job and Resource Fair on Wednesday, May 25th at Elmwood Community Center was a huge success. The event drew more than 150 job seekers, many of whom lived in the Elmwood neighborhood. The fair had 26 participating businesses spanning a wide array of disciplines. Many hired people on the spot or set up interviews for future meetings. One business in particular, who will be opening soon, said she believes she hired about 90% of her staff at this event. So an outstanding success, and a big thank you for Kristen Gorski, who is no longer here, but her collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce certainly spearheaded the success of this event. We will have the fire department will hold a promotional badge pinning ceremony on Monday, June 27th at 1:30 p.m. in the Town Hall Auditorium. All are welcome. Exciting news with the outdoor pools. They will be opening this weekend. So we have Beachland, Fern Ridge, and Kennedy all opening on Saturday, June 18th, this Saturday. Last day of school is Friday, so the pools will open on Saturday. Eisenhower Pool, as we all know, will remain closed this summer as it is being rebuilt and will be reopening for summer of 2023. It is dog license renewal month. June is dog license month in town clerk's offices throughout the state. And the West Hartford Town's Clerk Office mailed reminders to over 3,000 dog owners. So reminder for folks to take care of the renewals. We will be holding, West Hartford Bloomfield Health District is offering summer walk-in vaccination clinics for anyone aged 12 and over. The Health District offers Moderna and Pfizer vaccines. The next clinic will be held on June 21st at the Elmwood Community Center. Finally, our household hazardous waste collection will take place on Sunday, June 26th, down at the Department of Public Works at 17 Brixton Street. The Haz Waste program collects waste that cannot be thrown away or put down the drain and disposes of it through a safe environmentally protective manner. Typical items are kitchen cleaners, garage and workshop chemicals, and yard pesticides and hobby solvents, just to name a few. This full report can be found on our website, and you can click on a link to a complete list of hazardous materials that will be accepted on June 26th. So that completes my town manager's report this meeting. I'll turn it back to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwith. Any questions for the town manager? All right, very good, thank you. Corporation Counsel, Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I assume all of you are aware, the town was sued by two residents who sought to enjoin the Board of Education from moving forward with the change of mascot names at Connerton Hall High School. The lawsuit was served on the town just hours before the Board of Education vote. The Board of Education did vote to approve two new names, the Titans and the Red Wolves. And the following day, the residents filed an emergency ex parte an ex parte motion for an emergency injunction prohibiting the school from proceeding with any steps to effectuate the mascot change. We have engaged outside counsel, James Healy, and I would like to commend both him and Attorney Verano, who in under 24 hours were able to brief the matter and successfully achieved a denial of the motion to enjoin the town from proceeding with the effectuation of the change. That does not end the court case. The next step will be the town likely filing a motion to dismiss the case. And we do have a preliminary scheduling conference that is scheduled for July. However, I don't expect that there will be any evidence taken at that point. Madam Mayor, in addition to that, we do require an executive session this evening to discuss the potential acquisition of real estate. And I do not expect the council to be asked to take any action following the executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. All right, now we go to number 10, Mr. Sweeney.
Yep, Madam Mayor, without objection, I move that we postpone consideration of the application renaming Sycamore Lane to Pellegnac Lane, notice of the town plan and zoning commission's approval of a request filed on behalf of Isaiah Wooden for the renaming of Sycamore Lane to Pellegnac Lane to our regular meeting on July 14th.
Okay, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, the item is now postponed. And now we will go to announcements. I want to first graduate. What a beautiful, beautiful day it is outside for our Hall and Conard graduates that graduated earlier tonight. I want to thank Superintendent of Schools, Tom Moore, upon his last graduation ceremony and wish him well on his next endeavor. It is really very bittersweet. I was present, and I know many of you have also seen the flag retirement pit that Eagle Scout Jacob Mooney unveiled. He had such incredible support with the police and fire and public works department to see his project through. And this is a really, especially on Flag Day, to be able to announce that retiring flags in the right way. It's wonderful. And he was very, very proud. Riverfront Recapture Team goes to Northeast Youth Championship. This is the under-16 8-boat, competed in the U.S. Rowing Northeast Youth National Championship, and they placed 4th overall, qualifying them to compete in the championships in Sarasota, Florida this past weekend. This is the first time in the team's history that either an 8-seat girls boat has qualified. 4 of the 8 students are from West Hartford. They are Lillian Ahern, Gigi Collin, Margaret Hudson, and Geneva Swanson. Congratulations to all of them. And I rowed. I know how hard it is. I'm really so happy for them, and my son also rowed, so it's great. Adult tutors needed at Hannock. West Hartford Social Services is looking for adult volunteer tutors to work with adults who are learning the English language. Tutors can be one-on-one or in a small group. We need dedicated and patient tutors who have a command of the English language. If you do not speak a second language, you do not need to speak a second language. If you are interested in becoming a tutor, please contact Candace Chakowski, volunteer coordinator, at 860-561-7564. Again, that's Candace.czajkowski. New 2022 Connecticut Child Tax Rebate. This was adopted by the General Assembly. One-time rebate that's intended to help Connecticut families with the cost of raising children, which is it is a little help, but not that much. You may be eligible for a child tax rebate of up to a maximum of $750. That's $250 for up to 3 children if you meet all the requirements. You must be a resident of Connecticut. You must have claimed at least one child as a dependent on your 2021 federal income tax return who are 18 years or younger, and you must meet certain income thresholds. To learn more and to complete the required application by July 31st, 2022, go to https, it's the website egov.ct.gov and then / doctor's child rebate form. Storytelling event in honor of Gertrude Blanks. It will take place at the West Hartford Public Library on Thursday, June 16th at 6:30 as we celebrate Gertrude Blanks' contribution to the community by keeping storytelling alive. Local residents will share their stories of life-changing experiences. This will take place at First Church Auditorium at 12 South Main Street, and that's one of the reasons why there is an earlier tour of Brixton Street at 5:15. So if anybody wants to attend this event, they can, if they can, attend 5:15 at Brixton. I will be doing the earlier tour. Juneteenth community celebration, which will take place on this Sunday, June 19th. West Hartford will celebrate its 3rd Juneteenth community celebration in Blueback Square, a day filled with inspirational messages, music, art, and activities for all ages. And again, I want to thank Adrienne Billing-Smith for her work on this, and the whole team that has worked on it. They have a lot of thought and work has gone into a very, very meaningful day. The celebration begins at 10 a.m. with a service at First Church of Christ Congregational featuring guest preacher Reverend Fred Ward, followed by the dedication of a marker to Reverend Lemuel Haynes, son of West Hartford and first credentialed African-American clergyman in the United States. It's really amazing. The celebration continues at noon in Blueback Square with dedication of 14 new witness stones, event vendors, music, inspirational speeches, dance performance, and more. Inside the library is beautiful Juneteenth art exhibit, commemorative West Hartford Juneteenth bags, water bottles, and traditional red beverage from Avery Soda will be available at the main table in Blueback Square. Blueback Square will also be hosting its Sounds of Summer concert series June 22nd, 6 to 8 p.m., featuring Jukebox 45. Then on June 28th, Camp Blueback kicks off from 10 to 12 with activities for children including arts and crafts, summer storytime, sing-alongs, character visits, face painting, balloon animals, and more. On June 30th, enjoy 5 comedians live on the stage from 8 p.m. until 9 p.m. Bring on the summer and bring on the laughs. Also, there is the opening, the baguette cutting of the farmers market, which will take place, I think, at 10 or 10:30. I'm not sure because it's not on my announcements. 10 o'clock on June 19th as well in the town hall lot. So very, very exciting. Big day. Any other announcements from anyone? All right. And it is Father's Day on Sunday. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. You do a really, really, you have such an important role, and thank you for all that you do. Many fathers here. All right. And with that, we go to 12. Mr. Sweeney.
Yes. Madam Mayor, without objection, I move that we go into executive session to discuss the potential purchase of property.
Is there any objection? There being no objection, we will go into executive session. I'd like to invite the town manager, corporation counsel, deputy corporation counsel, and director of public works to join us.